Hello, Sarah Sabin, transformational leadership and business coach here. And I am speaking to Chris Relth, who is founder and CEO of Artemis Search Partners, on my Leading in the Modern Way video interview series today. Chris, welcome, and I'd love you to introduce yourself to my listeners.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sarah. So I said Chris Relth. I started in the recruiting industry right around 2005, but grew up as a headhunter. So different than typical recruiting. Headhunting's kind of the art of pulling passive candidates from target competitors for our clients for very niche roles. So essentially, headhunters going after the best candidates in the market, not the best candidates on the market. So not using the job boards, essentially. Um, when we started the firm 2009, Artemis was the goddess of the hunt. I thought I was super creative with that name, but found out later there's a ton of businesses named Artemis and wine companies, including NASA's new space program. It's called Artemis, but that's where the name came from. Right now, Artemis consists of three divisions in a joint venture. So we have Artemis Technologies, which places contract and positional direct hire for IT roles. Artemis Professionals places contract, positional, direct hire roles for accounting and finance. And then Artemis Search is our headhunting division. So targeted headhunting for functional areas all over the place up to the C-level. And then our joint venture, it's called Artemis United. It's a certified DVB, which is a disabled veteran business enterprise. And that business, we only hire veterans internally. Just we're pretty passionate about the military folks and helping them to make a transition to the private sector. But that team, military veterans internally, but we provide the same services as our other divisions, working with the state, the government, or any vendor diversity program.
Perfect. Thank you for going into further detail on what you do. And I would love to know more about you and your entrepreneurial journey throughout your many years running Artemis. Starting
Sure.
with what you consider to be the most significant challenges you faced in growing the business to its current stage and how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to even elementary school, I've always been a little bit entrepreneurial. And, I always tell people I was selling donut holes at breakfast in the third grade and then doubling my lunch money. But I never really called myself an entrepreneur until you go through all the difficult things, which every entrepreneur goes through. And some of the stuff I went through should have led to me quitting, but I didn't, thankfully. But, I think ironically, probably the most difficult thing we do is hiring for our own team, which is contradictory because we do it very well for businesses, but hiring for ourselves is probably the most difficult challenge. I love our industry so much. I thought everyone should be successful, and I've made some bad hires in the past that led to some cultural poison, which led to some legal issues, which led to sidelining the business for a few years, and ultimately making out of that. But I look back at that as a really good experience, even though you almost go out of business, you almost go bankrupt. All these things can happen when you get into legal issues, but it's something I look back and learn from and try to make the right adjustments moving forward.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I just want to pick up on the point that entrepreneurship is about resilience and grit. And I've yet to meet someone that didn't feel like quitting at some point. And I think what separates the winners from the losers is whether you quit or not. But I want to just dig down into some of the learnings you took out of recruiting for your own team, because obviously it's nearly led to the brink of collapse for you. So what have you learned now when you're recruiting for your team?
It's really identifying what I want to get out of the business and what I want everyone else to get out of the business, and why do it if you're not happy or not having fun, and really being committed to, regardless of that person's production, if they're not the right cultural fit, it's worse for your business. And I've learned that from a lot of different people. And I think going through some of the things I've gone through and then having the network that I do, realizing that society tells everyone this entrepreneurial journey is easy and look at all these successful people. And most people do fail, and realizing there's going to be these hurdles. I'll never forget sitting in this kind of forum type group that I'm in, and my attorney's in that group, and there's 8 of us, and all 7 of us had a lawsuit going at the same time that are business owners. And it made it feel normal, which it shouldn't be. But you can kind of do some things to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So really, after going through with that, I had to sit down and go, okay, what do I want out of the business, and what makes me happy? And what makes me happy is watching other people grow. And I can't do that if I'm, just a one-man shop, where I'd probably be more financially, personally successful than I am right now. But really going, okay, what do I want out of the business, and what feelings do I want to solve for, not just a number?
And how do you cultivate a positive company culture today and make sure that your employees are motivated and aligned with where you're going?
Right. I think, a lot of businesses, you walk in, they're going to have the values on the wall, but do they really stick to those values? And I had done those 4 or 5 times in the past. And, you can go around and ask at the time, and people didn't even know what they are, but really embedding those and strategically kind of getting everyone on board with them. So we took a lot of time working with some consultants to figure out what it is in our business that we want. And we came up with our company purpose, kind of watching Simon Sinek type videos. And right now it's to build a happy workforce, starting with ours. And we say that with like almost a little bit of an arrogance, because my belief is if our team's happy, they're going to treat the client well. If they treat the client well, you're going to make money, and it's going to be more sustainable. So it's really focusing on that, and just having an office of complete transparency, no poison, no one, taking someone else's client. None of that stuff is allowed here. So it's really just kind of focusing on that and focusing on our people and trying to develop them and help them to gain some mastery.
Yeah, and I love the point that you made about values, because having values on a wall means nothing at all if you're not living and embodying those values every day. So when you're looking at values, it's identifying the behaviors that you want to perpetuate every day, and those behaviors create the culture that you want. And
right.
When you're clear on that, you're much less likely to bring in people that are in contradiction to those values.
Yep. And sticking to them and kind of making sure, I think values drive the decisions that an organization makes. And one of the problems in our industry, like any big saturated industry, is it gets a bad reputation for all the right reasons. And how do you change that? How do you change that status quo? And it's really simple. It's telling the truth. Even if it's bad news to the clients, to internal folks, and just getting out in front of things. And you find that you actually build trust doing that. I'll never forget one of the first times when I was going through some legal issues. I had a client call with a bunch of orders, and it would have been huge for us, and most firms would have taken it on. But I was very honest with them and said, I'm not in a position, nor do I have the bandwidth. I could probably get 1 or 2 of the 20 roles done. Let me refer you to someone else that I trust and know. And they looked at me and they go, you're giving away our business? And I go, yeah. And I go, and they responded, okay, when you're on your feet and you're ready, you're the person we want to work with. I'm like, huh, that was interesting, kind of a reverse sale. I was just honest and told them the truth, where again, most people would have taken it on, maybe got some of them done, but failed the client ultimately, which gives everyone a bad reputation.
And in a world where it's about the sale rather than telling the truth, you can see why telling the truth, because it makes you stand out, it makes you unusual in the industry, made them want to work with you in the future.
Yep. And that's, my goal has always been, I don't want a little bit of 1,000 different clients business. I'd rather have 100 in all their business, and a true partnership where it's people that, I'd want to hang out with personally, that I get to do business with, not got to. There's a big difference from that for me.
And you're right, that does link into values as well, because, for example, if one of your values is integrity, then that very much affects the decisions that you would make as a company.
Yep. And there's a lot of companies that have integrity, like an Enron. That was one of their values, and that didn't speak the truth.
Yeah, that didn't pan out too well.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know more about what are your future plans for Artemis, and where do you envision the company going in the future?
Yeah. Again, most important thing to me is just having a happy team, and having a good time together. And we take what we do very serious, but not ourselves that serious. So We do that by, giving our team a lot of autonomy. Now you have to have certain processes in order to do that and expectation set and hire the right disciplined people. And then also a chance to gain mastery. I think that's super important. This is a business with unlimited income potential. So if you're at the right firm, but it takes time. Like anything where you can make a lot of money, it's years and years that you have to put in to figure out what level of success you can reach. And then really tying in some purpose to that. And as much as they're comfortable integrating their personal life, I think that's important too, because work sometimes is life and life is work. And if you can intertwine those two, that might lead to more success because people are ultimately going to go through things. And then I'd say, figuring out what my role is super important. Depending on economic conditions, I'm jumping in, I'm doing 1,000 different things, more than I've ever done. And frankly, right now, I'm not doing any of them very well. But getting back to where, okay, here's where I can make the most impact, but also what I like and enjoy doing, and how can I fill the gaps in where I don't like and enjoy doing them, and they're more I have to do, and get the right people that enjoy doing those things. That's really the future for me in my personal position. So it's getting the right people on the bus and finding and making sure they're in the right seat.
And I love that. I sometimes summarize what you said as working in your zone of genius. So doing the things that you're really good at doing and that you love doing, and getting people to fill in the gaps within a company. And that's often a transitionary process. It's not necessarily something that happens overnight, but if you start with the firm intention of this is where I'm heading towards, it becomes a lot easier to get there.
Yep. And aligning with those people on what the vision of what success looks like. And it took me a while to get very comfortable. Someone may have a different approach to get there, but that's okay. And can I learn something from them, and can they learn something from me, and can we collaborate to come up with the best systems, processes, procedures, etc.
100%. So I'd love to know more about how you define powerful leadership and how you see it impacting your business.
Right. When I think of leaders, I think the leaders we want on our team enjoy watching their team win more than winning themselves, which actually leads to more growth. I think leading through love rather than fear is super important. I grew up where it was a fear environment, and I was highly successful in that because I'm competitive, but it doesn't make you happy. And looking back, I think in your 20s, it's like, okay, successes make money. And once I made some money, looking back, I wasn't that happy, and I didn't understand why. And it was because basically there wasn't a purpose involved in that. And where am I going? What am I doing? Who am I trying to just feed and show that I can be successful? And learning those lessons, I think also leaders, we have to, at our company, focus on the culture, our why and our purpose before strategy and tactics. And that's sometimes hard to do. But it's the belief of that's going to set us up for better success in the long run. So really, it's also solving for a feeling rather than a number. Which again, I actually believe leads to a bigger number in the end.
And I love that, especially in the context of what is essentially a sales type environment. Recruitment, and to a lesser extent, executive search, can get a bad reputation, as we've already alluded to. And I think it's unusual, perhaps, to cultivate an environment in a sales environment where it's about seeing the team win rather than an individual being the best at getting the sales. And if you can cultivate that within a sales environment, it's very powerful, because obviously a team of 10 people that are great at what they do is much better than one star performer and 8 average people.
Right.
So in terms of you as a leader, how have you invested in yourself, and what steps do you take to continue to evolve and grow in your role?
Yeah, I think I've kind of always been intellectually curious, and I was fortunate enough through an old boss of mine at my previous firm to get introduced to an executive coach around 16, 17 years ago. Spent a lot of time there and expanded my network, and I'm involved in various membership organizations full of leaders. And going back when I was much younger, I did have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Wow, I'm hanging out with these folks that went to Harvard Business School, and I went to Chico State in California for 5.5 years. So it's really just getting comfortable and realizing, everyone's just a human. And if you get to know them on a personal level, it can be really helpful. And then, it's just asking and having the right network. You don't have to know everything. So, my goal has always been, if someone wants to know someone in the recruiting industry, they want to know me. If I need to know something about private equity, I've got a friend that does that. If I need to know something about a legal issue, I've got a friend that does that. And surrounding yourself with the right network of folks that want to help and create, win-win relationships.
And I think this is another key point I want to hit on, and that is, as a leader, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be the person talking the most. You need to be the person that understands how to build a team of smart people that, as a whole, create the winning formula for you to have a company that's successful. And I think this belief that leaders sometimes have, that they need to know everything, can lead to unnecessary imposter syndrome, can lead to them not being willing to ask questions or ask for help for fear of how it might be perceived. So it's really refreshing to hear that, yep. I defer to other people and their expertise. And I think one of my other interviewees put it very well, to understand what each individual's superpowers are and defer to that.
Yep. Yeah. If you try to do it all yourself, you're not going to grow the business that you envision, because you're going to run people out and you're not going to be leveraging what they can bring to the table, even if it's different than what you do.
100%. And finally, if you were to go back in time and to meet your 20-year-old self, what piece of advice would you give to him?
Well, I'd love to be 20 again. That would be awesome. I think a couple things stick out. One that I tell any younger person that took me a while to realize is successful people love to help, and asking them for help in an authentic way actually creates a win-win relationship. Story I always tell there is, there was a client I was after forever who should have wanted to work with me. So I was doing the classic salesperson. Let me take you to lunch. Let's go golfing. Let's do this. And then when I got ready to start the business, because I did really admire this person, I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business in 2009, maybe not the best time. And he called me right after that. I had emailed him and said, hey, what are you doing for lunch today? And he had flaked on 5 or 6 meetings before that. We go to lunch and we spent 2.5 hours together, and we walk out and he goes, hey, why aren't we doing business together? I'm like, I'd been trying actually for years, but I went to him seeking his advice and thinking, oh, he's doing me a favor. But it was really a win-win, because he was very passionate about mentoring young entrepreneurs. And in the end, we ended up doing a good amount of business before he ended up selling it. So that's one thing. Successful people, they love to help. If you reach out and ask for help, don't be afraid to do it. They will meet with you. And then one other little tidbit, I think it's not what I would tell myself at 20. It's not how many people you know. It's really the influential people you know and the story they tell about you once you earn their trust. So how do you earn their trust? And sometimes that takes some time, and being authentic and telling the truth and giving them feedback, even if it hurts, is important.
Yeah, I think that is the long-term view of things, which looks like trust builds over time. So this may not turn into something now, but if I build this relationship, it would turn into something longer term and better in the future. And that long-termism rather than short-termism is what's essentially going to make sure that you're around in the decades to come.
Right. Yep. In our industry, it really comes down, or any big saturated industry, you have two kinds of essentially salespeople. Very few consultants, mostly transactional, because it's kind of a rat race who can be the fastest, and that sacrifices the quality. And we're very committed to quality. So even if we're not the fastest, an example I would tell a client, great, the last firm had 15 candidates, you didn't hire any of them, so you spent 15 hours interviewing. If you can spend 5 minutes a week with me to give us feedback, we'll get you 5 candidates and you'll hire one of them, and they'll be better than the ones you got before. And we mean that. And if we can do that, and we can only do that and serve them well if they give us that feedback. So it's really kind of setting those expectations up front and showing them. I mean, ultimately, like any big industry, we're all kind of going to say the same thing. It's who can execute and who can do what they say at that level.
Amen to that. Doing what you say you're going to do, an essential element in trust.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation today, Chris. I've really enjoyed it. And I hope my listeners, you have enjoyed it as well. If you would like to take part in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series, please do reach out to me. Thank you and bye for now.
Thanks, Sarah.